Hello, turtles, and welcome back to another book with Bernie and friends. Today, we're going to be reading a coming of age story about a young Lakota Indian named Flying Cloud and his horse, Storm. This story beautifully portrays the life as a Native American on the Great Plains. Flying Cloud and Storm spend their days hunting and roughhousing with the other boys and their horses. But when an enemy raiding party steals his beloved Storm, Flying Cloud faces the ultimate rite of passage. He must join the rescue party and earn the right to wear the shirt of a warrior. Bold and beautiful artwork inspired by this style of the early Plains Indians illustrates the day-to-day life of the Lakota and tells the story of a boy accepting the challenges of manhood. Will Flying Cloud be able to save Storm? Will he become a great Lakota warrior? Let's find out.
Gift Horse, a Lakota Story by S.D. Nelson. Here's our title page, our title here, Gift Horse, a Lakota Story, S.D. Nelson, the author's name, and our publishing company. The thing I remember most from my early days is a horse, a gift horse. My father had been away visiting and trading with our friends, the Cheyenne. When he came home, he rode into camp with some new horses trailing behind him, and our whole village turned out to welcome him. Singling out a pony, he called to me. "This, my son, is the horse for a boy who is becoming a man, and a Lakota warrior," he said. As the young horse came forward, she snickered and stamped her hooves. She tossed back her head and perked up her ears. She was the blue-gray color of a thunderstorm, and her back was a blur of white spots like hailstones raining down. I named my horse Storm. Wonkantaka, the great spirit who is in all things, has already painted her like a summer hailstorm. With mixed paints, I added yellow thunderbolts and placed a red handprint on her hip. I circled her eyes with a red band so that she could see straight and true. Finally, I tied eagle feathers in her flowing mane. We spent all of the days together. I was already a good rider, but on Storm, I became like the wind. Across the wide open prairie we rode, beneath an endless sky of blue. People said the dust we stirred up looked like a flying cloud on the earth, so they began to call me Flying Cloud. There were many games we boys played on horseback. We practiced with our bows and arrows. We wrestled. Sometimes we played rough and were knocked from our horses. I always climbed right back on Storm. This was good training for us because when we became a Lakota warrior, we would need to defend our people from our enemies. Also, we needed to become successful buffalo hunters. If we failed at hunting, our people might starve to death during the bitter cold of winter. Early one morning, I sneaked out of my family's teepee and rode far away from camp. I knew I was not supposed to go, but I wanted to prove that I could hunt as well as any man. At first, the snow-covered ground made the fresh deer tracks easy to follow. But then, north wind began to blow. I dismounted for a closer look. Suddenly, 3 deer appeared. I shot one with my arrow, but my fingers were cold and I missed. Soon the gusting wind turned into a raging prairie blizzard. Storm whinnied and nudged me from behind. Her eyes held a look I had never seen before. Fear. My fingers were numb from cold, but somehow I managed to mount Storm. The snow was blowing so hard that I could not see my hand in front of my own face. "We're lost," I shouted. I wrapped my arms around my horse's neck. She was warm, just like my parents' teepee. "Storm, take us home," I cried. Together, we trudged into the darkness of the blizzard. We wandered for a long time. I was freezing and ready to give up when I noticed that Storm had stopped. There before us was my family's teepee. Storm had brought us home. She had saved my life. That blizzard taught me to think before acting. My mother saw that I had learned an important lesson. She told me that I was becoming a man and that I would soon be ready to wear the shirt of a warrior. She promised to make one decorated with beadwork and porcupine quills, but I would have to collect the quills. After many days of hunting, I finally found a porcupine. He was bristle and sharp spines. I could have killed him with one of my stone-tipped arrows, but I only needed some of his quills. I threw a small blanket across his back. When I pulled it away, the cloth was filled with a forest of quills. Before my mother could use the quills, she first had to make the shirt. The women and girls in our tribe tanned the animal hides that the hunters brought back to camp. They stitched them together to make many things, including all of our clothing and the lodge skins for our teepees. That spring, when the little green growing things began to show themselves, my mother and sister began sewing a warrior shirt for me. They used a fine antelope hide and decorated it with beads and porcupine quills. Also that spring, to prepare for becoming a warrior, my father took me into the sweat lodge with him. I sat in a circle with the men of the tribe. Several large stones, which had been heated in a fire, were brought in and placed in a pit in the center of the lodge. The buffalo skin door flap was closed, and darkness surrounded us. Old Yellow Bear, the medicine man of our tribe, used a turtle shell to pour water over the glowing stones. They hissed and spat. Steam filled the lodge. In the darkness, the men began to sing ancient songs that I had never heard before. It was so hot that sweat flowed down over my whole body. I felt wonderfully clean. Yellow Bear told me that I was now ready to go on a journey of the spirit, a vision quest. I spent 4 days alone, praying on a distant hillside, without food and water. Sleeping under the stars, I felt the pain and hunger and was very thirsty. I missed Storm. Each day I prayed to Father, Sun, and Sister Moon and to the star people. I asked Wakan Tonka to teach me the lessons that would make me a strong and good person. On the third night, a vision came to me. All of the four-legged creatures like deer, coyote, and buffalo are my brothers. I saw that all of the winged creatures like hawk and hummingbird are my sisters. Even the creepy crawlies like the lizard and spider are my relatives. I dreamed that, along with all of these creatures, we two-legged beings danced together in the circle of life. It was time to return to my village. My vision quest was over, and I had taken another step towards becoming a man. But I still had not earned the right to wear the shirt of a Lakota warrior. On the prairie, there were as many buffalo as there were leaves on a tree. My father told me that there was no greater honor than providing meat and buffalo robes for our people. The time had come for me to join the men of my tribe in the hunt. I remember how the earth shook under the stampeding hooves. My stomach was upside down with fear and excitement. Then Storm drew up alongside a large bull, and for a moment we were galloping together. I shot my arrow, and they flew straight and true. Suddenly, before me, a huge buffalo lifted a horse and a rider into the air. The bull turned them over into the earth. The terrified horse bolted away, and I knew the angry buffalo would attack the helpless man. Turning Storm, I galloped up to the rescue. We rode up just as the bull charged. With one hand, I grasped Storm's neck, and with the other, I reached out. Using all of my strength, I swung the man up behind me, and we rode to safety. Later, as I stood over my buffalo, I was so proud I howled like a wolf. I knelt down by my buffalo brother and thanked him for giving his life so that my people could eat. I thanked him for his hide and told him that it would make a fine robe to keep us warm in the cold of winter. We cut up the meat and wrapped it in buffalo hides. Everyone helped, men, women, and children. We loaded the bundles onto pony drags and hauled them all back to our village. As we traveled, my people made up a song. They sang about how a horse named Storm and a boy called Flying Cloud had rescued a fallen warrior from a charging buffalo. My father told me I had a courageous heart. He said that I was no longer a boy, but that I still was not yet a man either. There was one thing more I needed to do. I had to face my enemy with the heart of a warrior. That night we celebrated with a great feast and a buffalo dance. Many tribes lived on the Great Plains. Some of them, like the Cheyenne, were our friends, but others, like the Crow, were our enemies. Early one morning, while we slept, Crow horse thieves attacked. I woke up to shouting and pounding of hooves. Most of our horses were stolen. That morning, as the sun rose in the east, angry tears filled my eyes. How could those thieves dare to steal my precious Storm? We put together our own raiding party. Our men planned to go back and get our horses and to punish the thieves for stealing as many crow ponies as possible. We traveled on foot, following the trail left by our stolen horses. I prayed to Wankantaka to return Storm to me safely. Days later, we reached the Crow village. The sky was growing dark and a fierce thunderstorm was coming up. At first, I was afraid that the storm would ruin our rescue effort. But then I thought of my Storm, and I knew that Wankantaka was answering my prayer. The thunder beings beat their thunder drums overhead and threw spears of lightning to the earth. Rain poured down, soaking us to the bone, but allowing us to sneak up on our enemies. West wind roared in the treetops as we drew near our beloved horses. The men from my tribe dashed to the rescue. Hail pelted my face and shoulders. Lightning flashed as bright as day. In the glare, I saw my Storm and the Crow warrior who had stood guarding her. Thunder pounded overhead. I prayed for courage, and I raced to my horse. Lightning flashed against us as I knocked over the Crow guard and jumped on Storm. With my fingers clutching her mane, we disappeared into the wild night. I felt a Crow arrow whiz past my ear, but I never looked back. Yelping like a coyote, I helped chase the entire horse herd back home. The night was a great victory for our warriors. Upon our return, I was given the shirt of a Lakota warrior. To my surprise, on the front, my mother and sister had quilled the beautiful image of my best friend. In the years that followed, Storm and I shared many adventures, too many to tell. And so, with my gift horse, I rode from boyhood into manhood. The one thing I will never forget from my early days, so long as the horse with the eagle feathers tied to her mane and the red handprint of a boy. I can still see the two of us riding across the endless prairies of our youth, like a hailstorm and a flying cloud.
Flying Cloud showed grit and perseverance as he transitioned from a boy into a great Lakota warrior. If you'd like to learn more about Native Americans, stop by our media center and check out some of the wonderful books in our collection about Indians. Happy reading, Turtles!